The title of this is Eyes Don't Lie, the intersection of visual indications and Seedstock bull selection. And I'm one of those kind of people that talks and moves, so for the folks that are on one side, if I'm on the other, I'm sorry, but I'm going to use my laser pointer as much as I can. But I want to give a little bit more about my background. As John mentioned, I did grow up around Simmental cattle. I was heavily involved in the Texas Junior Simmental Simbraw Association. I was the director for a couple of years, president. Showed in the state and throughout at junior classics, and did my fair share of going to regionals and national classics, and so much so that I even married my wife. I grew up in TGSSA and AJSA, and as of last week, my son, who's 8 years old, got his freshly minted AJSA certificate. So for me, it's kind of fun to think about where I was 10 years ago, and some folks today were like, I haven't seen you since high school, and so I hope I haven't gained too much weight since then. But with that, what's also kind of fun for me, and when we talk about how important these associations are, there's another person here that was a part of the research team, Eli Mundy. Some of y'all might have talked to him. He's quite a jokester, but he actually just finished up his AJSA junior career as well. So not only me, but one of the undergrad students with me. We are two people that have had impact because of AJSA. So with that, I'm going to switch gears and now get more into the presentation. And what I'm going to cover is some stuff that we've done, what's built up to some of the research that has been published, and what folks are really interested in, and then also follow up with what happened today. So I'm going to pull up a picture, and what you're looking at here is from a sale catalog earlier this spring. And I just kind of want you to look at it for a second. There's no video. I'm not going to show you any videos, but what are some things that kind of attract your attention? So I'm going to ask somebody. Anybody want to raise their hand? Just say what you see immediately whenever you look at this image. Do what? API and TI. Anybody immediately go to the picture? The size of it, ratio, the ratio of the picture versus the ratio of what the EPDs are. I took out what I would call cheap talk, which is all the bullet points about the genetics and everything else. But, that's where AJSA had a lot of reason for the research that I do today. How many of y'all have taken the Cattleman's quiz? Okay. Whenever I was growing up in around 2010, 2011, if you wanted to be competitive in the Cattleman's quiz, you had to know EPDs. You had to know how to compare bulls, how to make selections on the multiple choices. If anybody knows Ellen Tom, I would give her a hard time and say she's looking at them incorrectly whenever she was making the choices for the test. But throughout that time of understanding EPDs and how they help make decisions, I would often sit there and think, well, I look at EPDs a certain way, and how does someone else look at them? You'd ask some folks, and they'd say, I don't believe in EPDs. Put them to the side. It's a black box of numbers. And then some folks would say, you just use your eyes, and whatever it looks like, pick the best one. And so for me, that kind of set the course for what we do in the research side of things, in terms of, if I think one way and look at an animal a certain way, we've all heard of livestock judging and how we rank animals within a class. Well, what about when we start sprinkling in EPDs and other information like adjusted ratios, performance information? How does all that go into the ultimate decision of someone either using that bull or not, or buying that bull or not, right? It's a simple binary result. Either they use it or they don't, or they buy or they don't. Sometimes there's a budget constraint, but oftentimes there's also a belief system or a consumer choice preference for these animals. And so that started us on this journey of research that we've been doing at the University of Tennessee, and I'm going to break it up into two segments. So the first one was in 2021. There's another professor at the University of Tennessee. His name's Troy Rowan. He's a geneticist. Some of y'all know him. But when he arrived at the University of Tennessee, it was a conversation. The very first conversation started with, hey, you know EPDs. I know EPDs and how I use them, but you actually make them. I have this idea about consumer choices and how people look at EPDs and how it impacts their decision making. I can do experiments, and I was trying to sell him on it, and I didn't really have to sell him on it. He said, let's figure out how to run experiments. And so from 2021 to 2022, we were actually running experiments in Alabama and Tennessee, where we were simply testing if people used EPDs and if they had impact on decision making. And we had people using 18 bulls. We had sale data on some bulls, and we said, okay, estimate the price. And we were just trying to elicit their belief about how much a bull is worth. And then towards the tail end of that study, I had just bought all the eye tracking equipment. Some folks were making fun of us for carrying around that wad of cash earlier, but on those tables out there is about $200,000 worth of equipment. Eye tracking equipment is not cheap. It's not made here. It's made in Germany and Switzerland, and so to get it in is very time-consuming and expensive. But at the end, we actually started getting our equipment and using it. And to our knowledge, this is the first time anyone's ever used eye tracking with livestock, and that was that first image that you're looking at there. This young man, I'll call him young man, he was looking at the animal, and it was like, okay, let's get a heat map. What is he looking at? And it was kind of interesting because when we rolled EPDs in front of him, he was staring at the middle EPDs more than anything. And so for me, that was just kind of an aha moment of, hey, there's something here. Well, we went on to publish that study, and it was called Predicting Seedstock Prices, Does Information Matter? Simply, we wanted to understand, do EPDs matter? And what we found was that it does. And so from that standpoint, if we know EPDs matter, what EPDs matter is the next question. And so with eye tracking, we were able to start doing experiments, and what came above it or came out of it from 23 to 2025, we actually were running experiments, and I'll get more into these results, but we presented them at the BIF conference a couple of months ago in Amarillo, Texas. And so you're going to see some of those results today, and then it was kind of laying the groundwork for what we did today as we're moving forward. Before I jump off, I want to say real quick, I see my guys there in the back now, so that means we're done. We had over 100 people participate here today, so out of 125 people, 100 of y'all participated. I want to say thank you, because that is a very good and strong response rate. And so the background. As we start thinking about EPDs, the earliest EPDs were developed for birth weight, weaning weight, yearling weight, and milk. I know some of y'all in here might have been around when they started developing those EPDs, so I won't call you out on that for being around that long. Until the early 2000s, all EPD profiles displayed growth traits, reproductive traits, carcass traits, and management convenient traits with their respective percentile ranks. So in the early 2000s, that's when the percentile rank came along and started being displayed as information pieces for folks when they were looking at EPDs. And then also starting in the early 2000s, researchers started developing and incorporating economic selection indexes into profiles. So for us in the Simmental world, API, TI, if you're an Angus, $B, $M, those indexes started becoming developed and incorporated into EPD profiles. And so those indexes, what makes them unique and really useful, as many of y'all know, is it takes more than a few EPDs, and it puts an economic weight on them and averages out to one number that you see that gives us a monetary measure for an individual to make a decision. So essentially it should be an easier or should be a tool that makes the decision easier for comparing bulls or females or anything of that nature, but in particular bulls. And so as these EPDs and economic selection indexes were being developed and adopted first by the American Angus Association and other breed associations, they were and still currently are placed on the far right-hand side, right? So if we see an EPD profile, the indexes are usually on the right-hand side more times than not. And so from a research perspective, if we look at that and we see all these indexes on the far right-hand side, that opens up a box of experimental economics that we unknowingly did in our industry. And that's because visual literature, and so literature on visual cognition on where people look, there's data out there and research that supports the idea that what comes first is seen first. And that's known as a primacy effect. So whatever you see first is what you automatically start looking at. And so if we think about that from a EPD profile standpoint, what's the first thing most people see if they read left to right? Calving ease, weaning weight, birth weight, those types of EPDs. And so the question became, with recent eye tracking study, viewers often skip over information and whenever there's dense layouts. And so if we're providing all that information in that EPD profile that I just showed you, and we know that those indexes are supposed to be decision-making tools that are made easier for the person using them, could the current placement of economic selection indexes inhibit their usage? Our geneticists do a really good job of developing these things, but if we can't ever get someone to look at them or understand them, then how are they supposed to use them? Is kind of the premise of the whole project. So this study, we wanted to understand a couple of things. One, we wanted to understand the influence of different EPD profile layouts. So if we talk about indexes being on the right, what happens if we put them on the left? Can we use the primacy effect to our advantage in order to achieve some type of decision-making difference? We also wanted to understand producers' characteristics that affect the accurate decision-making when buying a bull. We also wanted to understand, for the folks that have accurate decision-making across different segments, we know that within different segments there's differences, but across states, so we wanted to take this study to multiple states. And then we also wanted to understand factors that affect accurate prediction of quality differentiated bulls, meaning you'll see here in a little bit, there might be 3 different bulls that are high quality, low quality, and average quality, but does the person that's looking at these bulls, can they individually rank them and accordingly do that whenever they're estimating their prices? And I'll explain that a little bit more here in a minute. And so how we did this is we collected data, what we call lab in the field experiments. So if you participated today, that's considered a lab in the field experiment. It's not in a controlled environment. It's not in a isolated room. People can be walking, people can be talking. But incentivized means that we're paying people to come, and we have some type of instrument or mechanism that's trying to entice them to give us their best answer, i.e. we pay you more money if you make the right decision on a randomly drawn task. So if you did that today, you participated in an incentivized lab in the field experiment. And so for this study, we had 208 participants look at 18 bulls. 101 of them were from Tennessee, 30 from Alabama, 37 from West Virginia, and then Randy that just presented, we visited her last December, and we took 40 samples out there from their producers at an event that they had in December. And so how we did this was we prepared 18 price prediction tasks based on actual prices from bulls used, or actual bulls that were sold and marketed. And so if we get 18 bulls and we know what they sold for and were marketed for, we now have some type of baseline to use in our experiment. And what they would do is they would see a looping video of a bull for 15 seconds, and it would loop over. So Mr. Ivy, somewhere I saw him, he was earlier today saying we need a video on this task, and I said probably, that would be worth it, but for us it's very hard to find videos of quality bulls that are low quality and high quality from the same sale. But in this big study, we actually had looping videos for people to look at so they can do their visual inspection. And so what we also did was everyone got an EPD profile, and I'll explain here more in a minute, but this is what it would look like. They would see a looping video of the bull, they would see an EPD profile, and then from there, they would go on to predict or estimate what the value of the bull was. And so they did this for 18 bulls. So 208 people did this for 18 different bulls. There we go. And so the bulls that we selected were Angus, Simmental, and Hereford. Angus was an easier one for us because in Tennessee, a lot of people have Angus. Hereford was another common breed that's used, and of course, where we are, Simmental is heavily used, but also I'm a little bit biased as a researcher, and I'm going to use Simmental because I like Simmentals. So we used Angus, Simmental, and Hereford. We got 6 bulls from each breed for this study, and how we got these bulls, or why we selected them, was we had 2 that were low performing on their EPD profiles, 2 average, and then 2 high performing. And these were selected by Dr. Rowan and his students whenever we were scouring, looking for different sales that had the quality that we needed in order to make these tasks. And so if they have all of these tasks, participants were then put into what we would call the treatment groups. So we had 3 treatments, 1 control and 3 treatments. The control would be what we normally see, a looping video with an EPD profile that is typical of what you would see here. So calving ease on the left, all the indexes on the right. If you were put into if you were put into one of the treatments, you can see here that we had 4 groups. We either had the normal, so if you see normal on the top, it's a normal EPD profile. If it's flipped, we took the EPD profile and inverted it. So that's how we put the indexes on the front end. And then, because of the previous study about percentile ranks, I wanted to test to see if percentile ranks actually mattered. Half of the group got EPDs with percentile rank, and the other half got EPDs with no percentile rank. And if you were paying attention over here, how many of y'all had percentile ranks in your tasks today? How many of y'all didn't? It's the same type of concept. I put half of y'all in one group, half in the other. And so for this one, we had all these people, and they would just go in either to the control or one of the 3 treatments, and we randomized that. And so every respondent in this one got $15 for participating, because instead of 4 tasks like y'all did today, we had 18 tasks that they had to do. So we paid them $15 for participating. And whenever they had to estimate the price of that bull, if they were plus or minus $500 of that bull and its actual price, they got an extra $10 for participating. So some folks are walking away with $25 for about 20 minutes of their time. And so we also have learned that y'all producers are very smart and intuitive. And if we throw a $25,000 bull in front of you, y'all get mad. So what we did was we wanted to go look for bulls that were within reasonable, quote unquote, reasonable commercial price range in 2022. And we went and found bulls that range from $2,000 to $8,500. Nowadays, those prices are kind of laughable, right? If you see a bull for $2,000, some of our producers point fingers at each other and say, well, you're a problem if you're selling a bull for $2,000. And so so everyone knew the breeds that they were going to see. They knew their task and what they had to do in order to be seen as correct. And they also knew the price range. So we gave them a boundary of a minimum and a maximum for them to estimate. And then, of course, we used eye tracking. If you didn't participate today, eye tracking, we have infrared bars on the bottom of those screens where we can actually calibrate and we track your eyes. Today, if you did not calibrate well, it was fine. We still said go ahead and do the study because we can still get the data. But here's a picture of what we were doing in Iowa. This is what the stations looked like in Iowa. So if you had to stand for that long, we also heard a little bit about that. But also, of course, at the end of the day, we're trying to chase down, if this was the first image, what other images could we get if we did this across all these states? So I'm not going to bore you with all the econometrics that we ran. I'm just going to jump straight into the results and the things that matter to y'all. And so what you're looking at here is what we call summary statistics. So for all the information that we asked for in that survey, if somebody really wanted it, you could go dive line by line on this survey. The one thing in particular was almost 28% of people that we surveyed utilized Simmental genetics in their herd versus the 80% that said that they use Angus genetics in their herd. But one of the things I want to focus on, because I'm going to bring it up for y'all today in y'all's experiment, we asked people, do you use X, Y, or Z whenever evaluating animals? Similar to what we asked today, the exact same question as a matter of fact. Whenever we ask people, do you use EPDs whenever evaluating animals? 80% of folks said that they do. Whenever we asked them, do you utilize genomically enhanced EPDs, only 50% of people said that they do. So EPDs, 80%. Genomically enhanced, 1 out of 2 say that they actually use them. When we ask about phenotype, 90% of people say that they use phenotype. So there's 10% of folks in our sample that said they don't look at them whenever they're making an evaluation. I don't know much. I'm just a lowly old economist, but if you're not using your visual inspection and using physical characteristics, that's kind of alarming to me. If you're using, we asked them if they use EPD ranking. 62.5% said that they do. So we get kind of a mixed bag of results whenever we start doing this study around these states. 80% that say they use EPDs, 1 out of 2 that use genomically enhanced EPDs, 90% that says that they use phenotype, and then EPD rank only 62.5%. The other thing that I'd like to talk about when I talk to cattle folks is risk tolerance. If you're in the livestock industry, and in particular the cattle industry, you're probably more risk tolerant or more risk seeking than you want to admit. Because at the end of the day, more times than not, you're a price taker, not a price setter, right? We're operating a business that we produce, using our assets, we produce calves that then go on to the market, And we have no idea whenever we're making those breeding decisions where the market's going to be. And whenever we go to market these animals, whatever it is that day, that's what they're going to bring. You don't get to really set that price. If you're large enough, you probably get to have some price control, right? That's the economies of scale. That's the benefit of being large. But on average in the U.S., that 30 head or 35 cow herd is probably a price taker more than a price setter. And so in this study, we actually found on average, we've had 60% of people that were more risk tolerant or more risk seeking than the neutral. So that'll be interesting to bring back here in a little bit. And so if we get to the results of this big study, if we look at the control over all 18 bulls for all of these folks, on average, they were correct 21.43% of the time. And so 1 out of 5 times they were actually correct on average. For treatment 1, so the regular EPD profile with no percentile rank, they increased their average to 23.63%. So whenever we take away the percentile rank, their average or their on average estimation increased. They actually increased their accuracy. But the one that you see there highlighted in green is treatment 2, which is the inverted EPD profile with percentile rank. Whenever we did that, we almost got to 26%. So we went from 1 out of 5 to almost, or 1 out of 4, or 1 out of 5 to almost 1 out of 4 being correct. So we have increased this accuracy of these people taking this study whenever we invert it and still add the percentile rank. On treatment 3, which is inverted with no percentile rank, we dropped down to around 22% accuracy. So the takeaway from the get-go, whenever we ran the data, my eyes lit up whenever I thought and I hypothesized, if we inverted it, I bet we get higher accuracy. Whenever we ran the numbers and got to this one little stat, I was pretty excited because then the hypothesis was holding true. The other thing, there we go, is, again, if you wanted to really dive deep into the statistics, there might be some grad students that want to see the standard deviation, want to know the p-value and all of that of every variable. You're more than welcome to have these slides and look at it. But what I want to show you is if we look at specific treatments, I want you to focus on the one that I have squared in the green box. And if you look at the top, you see 1, 2, and 3 in parentheses. And then if you look above that, you see plus or minus 500, plus or minus 10%, plus or minus 20%. What we did with all these results, we said, okay, if you're plus or minus $500, that's what we would call a bullseye call. Like the person was able to make an estimation that was plus or minus $500 of the market value of that bull. And then we said, okay, let's relax that constraint and say, what if they were plus or minus 10% of that price? And then we'll relax it even more and say plus or minus 20%. So we're trying to use the data and say, okay, instead of being really particular and saying you have to be extremely accurate versus 20%, which is, hey, if you're plus or minus 20%, it's considered good. You can see there that treatment 2, whenever we're talking bullseye and you have to be absolutely correct, the only time we see significance of that inverted with no, or inverted profile with percentile rank is whenever it's got to be bullseye. When we relax that, so the layout that I thought, that I hypothesized would help accuracy that I just showed you, whenever we need those people to be on the bullseye, it worked. Whenever we relaxed that constraint and said it's okay to miss some, if you can be plus or minus 10%, plus or minus 20%, it goes away. So the more critical that you need to be, the information layout matters the most. That's what the key takeaway is whenever we start adjusting for those boundaries. The other thing that I like to highlight, and that was kind of disheartening for our Tennessee folks, is across the board, Iowa people were better off or better at predicting prices than Alabama, West Virginia, and Tennessee. They were statistically better, regardless of how intense we were with where the boundary was of a correct answer. I think some of that is because if we think about Iowa and we think about their cattle industry, what is in Iowa that is not in Tennessee, Alabama, or West Virginia? Fed cattle industry. I think that this is signaling to us that where we have states that have segments of the industry all within their state, whether it's cow-calf, backgrounders, the feed yards to the packing houses, I think that those breeders and their objectives and how they think about things is different than the states that don't. In Tennessee, we are a net exporter of feeder calves. We don't feed any cattle out in Tennessee. We do have some that like to do direct-to-consumer and freezer beef, but that's very minimal. And in the grand scheme of things, Tennessee and the Southeast as a whole is a net exporter of feeder calves to the Midwest, to the Southern Plains, to Colorado, and to South Dakota. And then, of course, I still shamelessly have to give Simmental a plug. Whenever we get to the plus or minus 10%, that's the only time we see any significance, meaning whenever it's plus or minus 10% difficulty of that price, the folks that said that they had Simmentals in their herd and they utilized them, it actually increased their accuracy. And then the other key thing that I like to talk about with these results are those 4 questions that I asked. Whenever I said EPDs, genomically enhanced EPDs, percentile ranks, and physical characteristics, the folks that told us that they used genomically enhanced EPDs, whether it was the bullseye or the 20% adjustment or the difficulty of what we were testing for, the people that said that they use them, it significantly made them better at estimating. Meaning that if they are using genomically enhanced EPDs, they were better off at estimating what the prices of these bulls were. Meaning they're using information and internalizing that and adjusting their decision, and it's impacting their decision on these bulls. The other thing that stuck out was EPD ranks. EPD ranks were significant for the 500 plus or minus 500 and at the 10% difficulty level. It did not become significant at the 20% level. But if you look at genomically enhanced EPDs and EPD ranks, does anyone remember the response of that? When we asked them, only 1 out of 2 actually used genomically enhanced EPDs, and only 62% of people used EPD ranks. Those people are better at estimating the values of bulls than the people that don't. Meaning information and utilizing that information allows them to make better informed decisions. And so whenever I have family members myself that will say that the EPDs are black box numbers, okay, even if you want to believe that, if you still can utilize that information in estimating prices of bulls, you're still better off. And so from that standpoint, it was really unique and cool to see that information does impact those animals, or does impact the value of those animals from a producer standpoint. And then the last one, I said risk. If you see there across the board, we had significance at the bullseye, the 10%, and the 20% difficulty level. And can anyone tell me the sign of that number that you're looking at? I'm going to pick on Garrett. Garrett, what sign is that? Negative, right? Across the board. Meaning if you're more risk tolerant, more risk seeking, more risk loving, you're more likely to be wrong. And if we think about that, I think there are, and probably hand up, I've probably done it myself. I'm willing to gamble on something that I think visually looks good, and I don't know if his numbers are telling me the truth or not, but he looks the part, and I'm going to gamble on it and see what happens. How many of y'all have done that? Y'all don't have to shake y'all's head yes or raise your hand, but think about that. How many of y'all have gambled on an animal thinking it'll work? And how many times does that work out? Probably not the same, right? It's not a 1-for-1 ratio. So when we think about that, risk preference in those types of folks that are risk-seeking, risk-loving, and willing to gamble, they're more likely to be wrong. And then the other part that was really unique finding that we've never found in ag economics and that type of literature is delayed gratification. If I asked y'all to set aside $100 and don't touch it for 1 day, could you do it? Okay, if I told you to set aside $100 and don't touch it for 100 days, maybe, right? It depends. Does that $100 grow at all? It impacts the decision, right? The decisions that you're making right now in the cattle industry impact what happens for the next 5, 10, 15 years. How many of y'all have animals that were born in the last big run of 13, 14, 15? Quite a bit, right? And so now if we ask people about delayed gratification, that's also known as the time value of money. That's how we look at that, meaning, are you willing to set aside something now in order to gain bigger in the long run? Are you willing to do that? The folks that are willing to do that are ones that are more likely to be correct. And more often than not, the risk-taking people are not delayed gratification people. They want a result now. And in the cattle business, we know that if you're only breeding for next breeding season and not thinking 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now, it's probably difficult to come up with a game plan from a management standpoint. And so those folks that are thinking and tolerant of setting aside something in order to have a bigger gain at the end, you are better off in this world. And the other big thing is trust. People that are more trustworthy or more trusting of people are more likely to be right. And so now I've talked about the plus or minus 500, the 10%, and the 20%. Is Dr. Decker here? I saw him yesterday. Some of y'all might know him. He's a geneticist here. But he had made a comment to me of, okay, you're trying to get people to be at $500. That's really hard. I said, that's true, and it's more of a mechanism to elicit beliefs. But he made me think about it, and I said, well, if we have 3 bulls, and in this experiment that we had them throwing darts at the wall kind of about prices, what if they were wrong all the time? That's bad, right? Like in our modeling, it would not pick up as being, we would deem them not good. But what if they were consistently wrong, but they assigned the highest value bull the highest price, even though it was wrong? Then they got to an average bull and it was correct, and then a low quality bull and they put the price, but it was considered wrong. But they still were able to delineate in their decisions the quality of bulls. And so ideally, you put more money on high quality, less money on average, and even more or even lesser amount of money on low quality. And so sometimes we see folks that are more like this, especially in Tennessee. We have folks that won't even look at a high quality bull because they're like, that's too expensive, I don't want to buy that. But then they'll spend more money on a low quality bull because it'll qualify for TAEP, right? And so then you try to push them for quality, and then they say, no, I'm not willing to give that much more. And so would you rather have somebody that buys bulls like this, or that wants bulls like this, or this? Which one? Someone that is able to delineate quality is very important. And so what we did was we went back to the data and we actually reran that to test to see if we could pick up delineation. So quality, the ones that can properly place high quality above average and above low. And so with that, what you're looking at here is focus on those green numbers. The Iowa people, they were 23.8% more likely to be correct or more likely to be able to delineate. So that drives home for us the fact that Iowa producers can accurately, even though they might be wrong in terms of price being right or wrong, they can delineate the quality versus the rest of the group that we had. But look at the ones that are highlighted there at the bottom, genomically enhanced and ranked EPDs. If someone is using genomically enhanced EPDs, they are 17.4% more likely to be able to delineate the quality of bulls. And the same story with ranked EPDs. If they use the percentage rank, they are 20.7% more likely to delineate the average quality of these bulls. Meaning, you might be able to, you might tell us that you use these things, but you're not accurately predicting. That's fine. But you're using these tools and able to delineate the quality of bulls. Meaning, us at Seedstock producers, you might have a producer that might not be willing to spend a lot, or they might have some type of constraint, but they probably know what they're doing if they're using genomically enhanced EPDs and percentile ranks. They can accurately make a decision. And the same thing with confidence. The more confident they are, is almost 1% more likely to be correct. And then financial decision making, the more confident they are in their financial decision making, the less likely they are to be able to make that quality differentiation. It kind of goes along with the risk preference. And so as we get into the eye tracking side of things, if we go back and say, this is what people saw, we've talked about the math behind it and what drives some of these differences, but let's check out their eye tracking. And if we look at a profile here, and we can go to our machines back out there, my students can, and they can pull up these types of what we call areas of interest. And we can assign an area of interest on a layout that you were seeing on those computer screens. And so for this one, we have one all over the picture or the video that you're seeing there. Then we also lumped the profile into production EPDs, middle EPDs, and then also the indexes. So if you're looking at this picture on the far right box on the EPD profile, those are all indexes. If you're on the left-hand side, that's your calving ease, your birth weight, your weaning weight, and your yearling weight, and then everything else is in the middle. And so if we do this over the whole group of people, we can actually look at how many people looked at phenotype, production EPDs, the percentiles for those EPDs, the middle EPDs, and the percentile rankings for those EPDs, along with the indexes and their percentiles. I'm not going to bore you with eye motions and what is going on in those machines out there, but all that to tell you is those areas of interest and those boxes that you're looking at, we're able to pick up how long people gaze at something and how long they get fixated. So if you just look over it, that's a gaze. If you get fixated on it and start to focus on it, we can measure all of that to the millisecond. And so for us, it allows us to look at images like this where we can actually look at as an aggregate over a given bull, everyone that looked at that animal, and we can look at individually is what you're looking at here, but then if we take each individual and we put them all together, we can actually look at the percentage of times they looked at it and gazed at it, and this is what we end up with. I just want you to focus on the first two things that you see, gaze and fixation. So if they gazed at it, they looked at it, it picks it up. If it's fixated, how long did they fixate on that certain area of interest? We can pick that up. If we look at what's red there, index percentiles. They were only gazed at 11% of the time for all the bulls, and only 10.4% of the people actually fixated on there. So the percentile ranks are the least looked at, or the actual percentile ranks for indexes are the least looked at area for people that were in our study. If you look at the middle EPDs and the production EPDs, it's around 65% for both in terms of people that actually looked at those. And then also around 60% of those folks actually fixated on there. But if you look at phenotype, 97.79% of those folks actually looked at it, and when they did, 100% of those actually fixated. So they were studying that pretty dramatically. So for us, this tells us a couple of things. People look at phenotype, and they'll sit there and look at that. And then when we get to production EPDs and middle EPDs, 60% of folks will look at that. But then when we talk about index percentile ranks, very rarely are those looked at, 1 out of 10. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about the highest value bulls or lowest valued. Phenotype is always the highest at 98% for the highest value bulls that we had in our study. And the index percentiles were only 13.5% of folks looking at, and only 13% of those actually fixated. So index percentiles and their ranking are not looked at, relatively speaking, not at all. And then the same story with low quality bulls. Yes, sir. We'll get to that here in a minute, today. But I think some of it is, on average, I think part of it is that. I think there is, for the Randys of the world and the Troy Rowans of the world, it's job security for them. They got to educate about indexes and how to use them and what does it mean for those folks. And especially if we're talking about the commercial producer, I think there is a lack of understanding between breeds and those indexes and how do they work. I think that's why we often hear questions about, are we going to get one unified index for all breeds in one spot? Things of that nature. I think it's because they don't know what they're looking at or how to use them. But that particular question that you just asked led to one of the questions that we asked today, and those were interesting results. So again, the same story. Phenotype was always the highest thing regardless of quality of bulls. And so if we know now that there is a difference between phenotype and how the EPD lay, or what EPDs are getting looked at and how long they get looked at, I think that offers the question of layouts. How does your current layout look to somebody that you're trying to get to buy? And I often use Cheesecake Factory and Waffle House. How many of y'all have eaten at Cheesecake Factory? How many of y'all have eaten at Waffle House? Okay, if you go to Waffle House, you pretty much know what you're going to get, right? You know what you're looking for. You don't even really look at the menu. You know what you're going to go do. If you go to Cheesecake Factory, do you start looking through that menu a little bit more versus Waffle House? And I'll be the first one to raise my hand. Sometimes there's words in there that I can't say, and I'm like asking the waiter or the waitress, hey, what does this mean? What kind of food is that? To me, that is a simple version of information overload. Information overload has been proven to cause confusion and uncertainty in decision making. If we look at these layouts between these three, some of them might be more information driven for folks that really like numbers and they really like looking at those. That's completely fine. But on the average, I would contend that all three of these have a segment or a flare of information overload. Hence why today, how many EPDs did you see today? 2. And how many? And half of y'all got it with percentile ranks, half didn't. There was an intent behind that study to see if I could prove that information reduction helps. And so that's why I started chasing the 100 people, because if we started getting towards that, I could have power. But I think if you're a Seedstock producer, think about the information you put out. Sometimes less is better. But if you're going to do less, what information matters at that point? And so this study, our biggest takeaway was that emphasizing economic selection indexes and catalogs can enhance producers' evaluation accuracy given the study. But to your point, maybe they don't understand it. Maybe it's hard for them to internalize that and use that from a decision-making standpoint, which is where extension folks and stakeholders can help with education. Using ranked EPDs and genomically enhanced EPDs consistently often leads that person to performing better. So if we have folks that understand them and use them, they're more likely to be better off in their decision-making process. And so the results suggest that familiarity with and reliance on more sophisticated genetic tools can enhance a producer's ability to make informed price evaluations. Meaning if we can get more people to understand them and use them, the better off they are with their decision-making. But in today's current standing, information overload might be occurring, and the folks that know how to use this information have an advantage in the market. They know how to delineate high quality versus low quality and average quality. And participants with higher trust and greater willingness to delay gratification were more likely to be accurate. And those with higher risk tolerance or risk seeking were consistently lower in terms of accuracy and performance. And then producers from Iowa were consistently better across the board, regardless of how hard we made it. The Iowa folks were much better than everyone else in our study. And so producers who utilize genomically enhanced EPDs and ranked EPDs and are from Iowa were more likely to be better off in price prediction. But I think the first two that you see there, genomically enhanced EPDs and ranked EPDs, are the big takeaways. From an eye tracking standpoint, everyone, for the most part, utilizes their eyes when they're physically looking at the animal and checking phenotype. Breed indexes are not commonly used by producers, and the percentile ranks are even further less utilized. And then production EPDs are often used the most. So production EPDs, how we labeled them, were calving ease, birth weight, weaning weight. I think some of that gets to how they learned about EPDs. If you've learned calving ease or weaning weight or birth weight, and you found success with that, it's probably hard to change your behavior to an index whenever they become developed. So the folks that have been doing it one way for so long, they might not want to have to change and utilize something else because they think that they know what's better. It's a common term in agriculture. We do it this way because we've always done it this way, right? Same type of thing in decision making. And then compared to overall average and specific breeds, indexes were analyzed the least. So that kind of led to today's study. The objective that you were given, some of y'all were telling us you wanted us to go back and we didn't allow you to do that. So today I will highlight kind of what we were trying to understand. partly we wanted to look at, when we had a conversation, Jackie and John, it was kind of a blank slate for me as a researcher, but it was, hey, do the indexes matter? Whenever I start thinking about API and TI, how many of y'all use API for replacement heifer decision making? Okay, how many of y'all use TI for heifer replacement? Right? Some of y'all are trying to chase the terminal side. Okay. How many of y'all, if I put y'all in a feed yard, how many of y'all would say that, if we're doing retained ownership, how many of y'all would say that API is useful? How many of y'all would say TI is more useful? More useful. Okay. So I had this grand idea of I was going to make an experiment where I was going to test all of y'all about API versus TI for replacements, and then API and TI for the feed yard. And I had this grand idea until about a month ago when Dr. Rowan, I was talking to him, and he was like, well, I don't know if that's truly testable, because API could also be used for terminal stuff. And I said, okay, I will drop that idea, and we'll circle back to terminal. And so the objective of today was to test, if I told you your objective was to find a bull for somebody that has 35 cows and they retain every calf through the feed yard that they can, and profitability is their operations objective, and they wanted a bull that must rank in the upper third for the breed, could you find a bull out of the pair or neither that matched this? So we were trying to get you to look at TI and compare TI. That was the whole goal for every set. And so that's why it allowed me to put half of y'all in percentile ranks and half of y'all not, because I lowered the amount of people that I would need. So we're all consultants. We're looking for a bull that can help someone retaining ownership through the feed yard. And you don't have to pick a bull if you didn't want to, if you felt that there was not a good enough bull. But y'all would see the first set here. The first set here, who are the folks that did not have percentile ranks? So for those folks, the other half saw this. They saw the bulls with EPD and percentile rank. And what you have here is a bull that's in the 1% for TI, and then the bottom 70 percentile for TI. The folks that didn't have it, you don't have percentile ranks, but if you're stuck with this, what can you do to pick between these bulls? Just compare TI, right? What do y'all think the correct answer is? A. Set 2, the percentile rank of 65 and 30 for TI. Y'all saw the same bulls without the percentile rank. From this standpoint, what do y'all think is the correct answer? B? B is the correct answer. We used a catalog out of South Dakota. Some folks might have seen it before, but why would B be correct outside of the fact that it's a higher TI? Fits the criteria. They wanted a bull that was in the upper 1/3 of the breed. So that's where we got to. So if it was, as long as it was 33% or higher, we knew that we could satisfy the requirement. So B became the higher or the preferred choice. If we got to the third set, we have these bulls here that are in the 50th percentile, and I believe it's also in the bull B is in the 15th percentile. I covered it up on accident there. But between these two bulls, which is the better bull? Bull B. Bull B is the correct answer. This is the fourth set. We have a bull that's in the 50th percentile and the 60th percentile for TI. Which bull? Neither. Now y'all know the answer, huh? Because in the results, that wasn't so obvious. But yes, the answer here is neither. Neither bull is better, or neither bull is good because of the one caveat of upper 1/3%. And this is what it looked like for someone that was actually going through it. I did not pull the number, but this is what somebody was looking at while they were going through these selections. And so you can see this is fast-paced, obviously, for the sake of the presentation. But you can see here, this person's looking all over the EPDs, the percentiles. This one in particular is looking a lot at API for some reason. but maybe that's what they were a deciding factor on. That person was wrong on that choice. They select neither when the answer was B. And then here's the last set. This is the fourth set here. Let's see what they're doing. Focusing. They select neither. This person selected the fourth set, the correct one. They were wrong on the third set, but correct on the fourth set. So by doing that, I had about an hour to get all of the other information when y'all made y'all decisions. I culled that and made the summary statistics for it all, and that's what I'm going to show you. I told John after this study is done, I am going to go back into the lab and get the heat maps made, and it'll come out in one of the popular press articles. But now that we're at 100, selfishly as a professor, that means I have what we call statistical power, meaning I can actually probably do a journal publication off of this. So I'm going to go off and try to make an academic journal now too. But so all that to say, thank you for getting us to that level. And so here are the results. For set 1, set 2, set 3, set 4, you have without percentile ranks and with percentile ranks. Set 1, there was no difference, 88% accuracy. We get to set 2, we all got pretty bad on that one, 38% and 32%. If we get to set 3, we then start to increase, 66% and 58%. We get to set 4, this is where I figured there was going to be some differences because of the caveat of that 1/3, right? And look at the results. Only 17% of people without EPDs got it correct versus the with EPDs, 62% of those people got it correct. Whenever it's a closer decision like that set 4 was designed to be, information matters. The percentile rank allowed those people to make that decision. I can run a T-stat for folks, but I guarantee it's going to come up significant. So whenever we saw those results, getting back to your question earlier, I wanted to see if I could say, yes, they might not be used and they might not be looked at, but could I show that they're actually really significant? And today we showed that. Whenever we asked the question, do you utilize any of the following information in your evaluation? 97% of people without EPDs and 100% with EPDs said that they use, or the percentile rank said that they use EPDs. 95 and 88% for genomically enhanced EPDs, so much higher. So this crowd is, I would assume that was going to happen because y'all are here, y'all are probably more progressive, probably more adaptive in utilizing EPDs. Physical characteristics, 100% across the board. That's good. Percentage rank, look what happens there. We go down to 92% and 97%. So we have 92% of people saying that they don't use it, and they say 92% without EPD, or without the percentile rank, said that they use percentage rank. But when we actually made them perform without it, 17% accuracy. Stated versus revealed preference is what we call that. That is, yeah, I use it, or, I can use them, but whenever, or 8% of those people said that they do or don't, look what happens. Your accuracy goes down. What about for the folks that hit all 4, what we would call quality differentiation? With EPD, or with percentile rank, 14% got all 4 correct. Without, 11%. Out of all 77 participants, whenever I pulled the data about an hour and a half ago, 13% of y'all were accurate across the board. So 13% of y'all can delineate the quality of these bulls based on the study that we designed and made y'all take. But I think one of the most interesting stats for me was we asked a question. Which is better, or which is higher, 99% or 1% whenever you're looking at an EPD rank? Which is higher? 5% of y'all said that 99% is higher. 12% of y'all said that you were not sure. And 83% of y'all picked their correct choice. So in this crowd, 17% of y'all, there is some uncertainty about 99 versus 1%, and that is okay. For us in academics, or in the academia side and extension, that is stuff that we have to work on. If we're going to continue to push these EPDs in terms of using them, and you have to use them, we need to do our job in terms of making sure you understand what they mean. And so when I see that 17% of folks were wrong and didn't know that 1% was better than 99%, that's something that we need to talk about. So if you don't remember anything else, 1% is better off than 99% if you don't remember anything else from the day. 65% of y'all were Seedstock producers. 40 on average, everyone in here, farm-related activities contributed 40% of your income. Majority of y'all were from Missouri, but we did have some folks from Texas, Kansas, and Colorado, and Wyoming. We did have quite a bit from Tennessee. But the key takeaway is today from the study that percentile ranks do help. We showed it in that big study. We showed it today. And if you're unsure as to how to use those indexes and percentile ranks, there's plenty of literature out there. We'd be happy to help you. One last shameless plug is Southern Ag Today. How many of y'all have heard of Southern Ag Today? Big fan? All right, everyone else, we need y'all. So Southern Ag Today is a daily blog, is what I'll call it, a blog, that comes to your email box, and it'll have a figure like you're seeing right there with the steak or a picture. It has a title and some commentary. And this was written by a really smart person named Charley Martinez at the University of Tennessee, talking about growth and forward delivery beef sales. But it's free. All you got to do is subscribe, put your name and email, and we cover things from livestock to crops to farm management. Right now, tariffs are a hot topic, so we talk about everything that occurs. One other last plug is Brownfield Ag News. Josh Maples from Mississippi State, Kenny Burdine from the University of Kentucky, and myself, every Friday we record a show that's on farm radio, but also on YouTube and TV, talking about the livestock markets for hogs and beef producers. And so if you would, that'd be really cool for y'all to tune in. We got to get the views up. But if you ever need anything, this is my contact information. The easiest way to get a hold of me is my email. If you're on Twitter, I'm still I'm a traditionalist, and I still call it Twitter. That is my handle. But with that, I appreciate the time. The 18-year-old me was really excited to be here, and I'm excited that the researcher side of me gets to show you what we've been working on. I'm really proud of my team. If you all would give my team a hand for helping us out today. And with that, I will take any questions, and if there's a question about where you think prices are going to go, I am still a firm, and it's been written. I think prices are we still got till 2027 at the earliest. I think prices still got a while to go. Any questions?
How do you account for memory loss, if you will? Well, by the time you get to scenario 4, you've totally forgotten the scenario.
So that's one. That's why we only had 4 tasks. But memory loss, I can't control for that, because there was towards the end there were some folks saying, "Hey, can I go backwards?" So maybe next time we need to add that in. And if we send this to Journal Pubs and I get a reviewer that asks that, I'm going to be thinking of you when I have to answer that and figure out a way to answer that more academically. Yes, sir.
I know the eye tracking stuff is really cool, but why can't you just ask people how they're making a decision rather than what do you get out of the eye tracking?
So, are you an academic by any means? Like, have you ever been in faculty or anything like that? No. Okay, so in our department, I get that same question from the older professors to begin with. But the reason why eye tracking, the reason we use eye tracking is, one, for confirmation as what we're seeing. So there's a stated preference, I like this. There's a revealed preference of, did they pick that? Whenever we start using eye tracking, for sake of brevity and for simplicity, I don't really go off in the details because there's a lot of statistics that go behind the scenes. But in that video, you could see a number on each time that it was moving. And I think in ours, it was like 688. What we're doing, and some of the students are doing this, we're actually going and measuring the time that they're doing or that they're moving around. And also it allows us to pick up patterns. So what I'm trying to pin down is, if I say that the pattern or the layout matters, I want to use eye tracking to understand the pattern. Is there a tendency? And to tell you the truth, there is a tendency. When people open up, they automatically go to that left-hand side. They sit there, and then oftentimes they'll make their decision before they even get to the end of that EPD profile. And so their stated and revealed preference and what we see in the experiment, we see that, but we also know now the pattern and what they're doing is telling us that that primacy effect is in effect. And so we can say, this is why this is occurring. So the eye tracking allows us to do that. The eye tracking also, we're using in other ways. So like if I put a steak in front of you, where do you look at on the steak? Because we actually have glasses that can do the same thing. So eye tracking for us allows us to measure things in different ways that we have never been able to do. Yes, sir.
Will this influence how you see Knoxville lays out their sales catalog?
I hope so. If Troy Rowan or any of those folks are here, I do think that it has led already to, I think last year we redid the catalog, and I think that's going to be another change coming on because of this simple studies, the simple studies that we've been doing. We're actually going to put it into practice and see what happens. Yeah, so if we go back to the big long table of stuff, we actually have in there, we control for male, female, age, cattle business as a full-time. We actually have some other factors there for the other studies where we do the same thing, and none of that was significant. So to me, I think that's part of the complexity of the cattle industry. We have a lot of different folks that none of that seems to matter at all in terms of their decision making. It's information that really drives their decisions.
So that would say younger generations are selecting cattle a different way as
From this, there is no difference between how they are selecting those or how they're using information to make that decision. But what information they're using to make that decision is what the difference is. Any other questions? And again, thank y'all for taking our study today. I did not expect that response rate, and it was strong, and I really appreciate that. Awesome.